Welcome, weary traveler, as the hum of your day fades, and your body begins to settle into the stillness of night. Allow your mind to drift far from the here and now. Tonight, we'll set sail not on a grand adventure filled with danger and glory, but on something quieter, slower, heavier. This is a voyage into the forgotten corners of history. The quiet misery between the heroics, the creaking wood beneath bare feet, the coarse salt air stinging open skin, the long, long days spent staring at a line where the sea kisses the sky with no land in sight and no end in reach. We begin tonight in the early 1600s, when the world was still half imagined, when the promise of riches and discovery lured men onto ships with names like hope and deliverance. But beneath those names, beneath the fluttering sails, and beneath the deck, lay the true cost of exploration. Tonight, we explore why it truly sucked to be a colonial sailor. Let your thoughts float like driftwood across centuries of waves. Let the stillness of the ocean hush your mind. Let's begin. Imagine yourself stepping onto the deck of a ship named the Unity. It is 1612, and the wood beneath your boots is old, groaning with the memories of other voyages. The sails above catch the wind with a heavy sigh, and already the scent of pitch, tar, and stale sweat curls into your nose. You are now one of the crew. The first thing you'd notice is not the glory of the sea, but the smell. The air is thick not with saltwater freshness, but with the cloying, sour scent of dozens of unwashed men packed into a space no larger than a modest cottage. There are no showers, there is no privacy, and the breeze, when it reaches you, brings only the smell of rotting meat and mildew-soaked ropes. Below deck, the ceiling is low. You must stoop. You, LLB, sleeping here shoulder to shoulder, with others on a shared wooden platform known as a berth deck. There are no beds, no blankets, unless you brought your own. If it rains, and it often does, the water seeps in through the seams, soaking the planks, soaking your clothes, and pooling under your back. Now think of food. You're hungry, twice a day, if you're lucky. The cook boils up something called lullaby, a thin gruel of oatmeal, sometimes mixed with grease or salted meat. The meat is salted beyond recognition, dry, stringy, and riddled with sinew. It has been stored in barrels for months. You chew it for sustenance, not for flavor. If you're particularly fortunate, you might find a hard biscuit, what sailors call hardtack. But beware, those biscuits are alive. They come with small, wriggling companions, flour weevils, tiny bugs that burrow through the dry bread. No one bothers to remove them. The men joke that it adds protein. You learn not to look too closely before you bite. Water, there is some stored in large casks. But after a few weeks, it turns. It smells green and tastes worse. Most prefer beer or watered down rum, not because it's refreshing, but because it's safer. And then there's scurvy. You begin to feel it in your gums, a softness, a dull ache. Your teeth feel loose. You don't understand why. No one really does, but you've noticed your fingernails curling strangely. You've seen men lose strength in their legs. You've watched wounds that never heal. The ship's doctor, if there is one, can only offer vinegar or a prayer. There is no fresh fruit, no green vegetables. The concept of vitamin C is centuries away. You sleep when you can. You rise with the bells. Watches are long and cold. You take your turn scrubbing the deck with salt water and sand, trimming sails high above on swaying ropes. or heaving cargo from the holds, straining your back against dead weight in the humid dark. If a storm comes, you will not sleep at all. The ship groans like a wounded animal. The waves lift it high and drop it down, again and again. Rain lashes from all directions. The sea rushes over the deck. You lash yourself to the rigging and pray. The hours stretch, days blur. Weeks pass without sight of land. Some men lose their sense of time. Some lose their minds. To pass the hours, the crew sings shanties rough, rhythmic songs meant to keep pace with the work. Their voices are deep and dry, and sometimes the songs are the only things keeping them tethered to the world. Stories are told, dice are thrown, jokes are muttered in the dark. Laughter, when it comes, is short and thin. Discipline is harsh. There are no courts on the sea. Disobedience means the lash, your back marked in silence. If you steal or fight or shirk your duty, the consequences are swift and often public. A man can be tied to the mast, left to stand without food or water, or worse, cast out into the sea. But it is not all punishment. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right and the sea is calm and the sails hang full, a hush settles over the ship. In those moments, the sailors lean over the rail, watching the water change color. They speak quietly of home, of people long out of reach, and the moon above looks kindly down, as if offering comfort no man aboard can give. And in the stillness, as the ship drifts through the endless night, there is time to wonder, was it all worth it? The damp, the rot, the hunger, the fear, all for what? A distant land, a few coins, a name remembered in a logbook. The sea takes more than it gives. Now we leave the creaking of the Unity behind and drift northward to a frozen passage, where a man with ambition met a quiet, icy end. But of course, not every man at sea was nameless. Some chased not just survival, but something greater: glory, discovery, a place in the books of history. They charted unknown waters with hope in their hearts and ice in their path. One such man was Henry Hudson. He believed he could find a shortcut to Asia through the Arctic. He believed the sea, though cruel, could be reasoned with. That belief would cost him everything. Now, let your thoughts follow the wind northward. The waves grow colder, and the silence of ice is more final than any storm. This is the quiet tragedy of Henry Hudson. There are few silences more profound than the one found in frozen waters. After the crowded stench of the lower deck and the endless groan of creaking timbers, imagine now a different quiet, a stillness so complete it absorbs even the sound of your own breath. The sea is no longer restless. It has hardened. The wind is slow, heavy with frost, and the world has gone white. Here, in this still expanse, the story of Henry Hudson comes to rest. Hudson was not born to fame. His origins, like the waters he sailed, are murky. Likely born in England sometime in the 1560s. We know little of his early life, but we know he was drawn to maps and to the mysteries that lay just beyond their edges. In his time, the world was changing. European empires were racing to outmaneuver one another, sending ships in every direction, tracing coastlines, naming bays, chasing spices and silks. But one dream, in particular, remained elusive: the fabled Northwest Passage, a shortcut to Asia, a sea route through the top of the world. Most believed it was real, just hidden, waiting to be found by someone bold enough, fanned, stubborn enough to push far enough north. Henry Hudson believed he was that man. His first voyages met ice and disappointment. He turned back from frozen seas, unable to break through. But he returned again and again. In 1609, sailing for the Dutch East India Company, he turned west in Stadon, found a river, calm, winding, tree-lined. He traveled far up its length, unaware he was giving his name to what would become the Hudson River. It was a success, but not the passage he sought. Still, he was convinced the answer lay north. The maps were incomplete, he said. The world was not yet fully drawn. And so, in 1610, Hudson secured another expedition, this time with English backing. He was given a sturdy ship, the Discovery, and a crew of 20-some men, among them his teenage son, John Hudson. They set sail in April. Imagine that departure. Cold winds cutting across the Thames, sailors standing on deck, cloaks pulled tight, staring at the gray water ahead. Some were seasoned, others were pressed into service. All of them knew what they faced. Long months, unknown coasts, little chance of return. The journey began with promise. They passed the Orkney Islands, crossed the open sea, and entered the cold inlets of northern Canada. The days stretched longer, the nights turned pale. In August, they found it, a vast inland sea. Hudson named it Mare Magnum Septentrion Liva, Great Northern Sea, what we now call Hudson Bay. It was enormous, over 1 million square kilometers of icy water. He was certain this was the gateway. Just beyond, perhaps, lay the open Pacific. He ordered the ship deeper in, but the coastlines didn't open. They curved inwards, narrowed. The months passed, and the chill deepened. The passage did not appear. By November, the ice came. The ship could no longer move, trapped. Now imagine it, 20 men, packed into a wooden hull, no longer than a modern school bus. Snow falling outside, darkness stretching 18 hours a day, food frozen into blocks, every breath hanging in the air. Their world shrank. Days were marked by meals, barely warm and thinning, salt beef, dry peas, and hardtack. The biscuits had long since become infested with worms. The beer had gone sour. Fresh water froze in its barrels. Rations were carefully divided. Illness crept in, not loud, but slow. Swollen gums, pale skin, scurvy. Hudson, for all his faults, kept hope. He wrote in his journal of spring, of melting ice, of a way forward. But others were less convinced. They blamed him for their fate. Morale cracked like the ship's timbers in the cold. On a morning in June 1611, as gulls circled low and the sea shimmered with slush, a quiet mutiny took place. Hudson, his son, and a handful of loyal men were taken without ceremony, without shouting, and placed into a small open boat, a shallop. They were given a few blankets, some powder and shot, a bit of food. Not enough. And then the rope was cut. The Discovery, under new command, drifted away into the mist. The small boat stayed behind. What happened to Hudson after that is unknown. Did they row? Did they drift? Did they pray? Were their last days filled with silence, or with words no one would record? No one ever saw them again. The Discovery made it back to England, barely. Of the original crew, only a few survived. Their story was met with suspicion, but no trial followed. The sea had taken judgment into its own hands. Hudson was gone, but his name lived on maps, on rivers, on bays, but not as a hero, not truly, more as a ghost, a warning, a reminder of how little the sea gives back. Even today, the ice returns each year to Hudson Bay, sealing it off, holding it still, as if keeping the secret. If you ever stand on its shores and look out across that pale expanse, you might imagine the faint sound of oars, a father and son drifting in silence, their breath fogging in the cold. No cries, no final words, only the soft, steady hush of snow falling on water. And now, with that hush in your ears, let us descend deeper past the surface into the forgotten wreckage far below, where ships that once defied the sea now sleep quietly, and where their stories lie scattered like bones on the ocean floor. The sea, you see, remembers. It keeps the names we've forgotten, the promises never fulfilled, the boats that left harbor but never returned. Long after sails have torn and masts have splintered, the ocean holds what remains, quietly, patiently, beneath the waves. Let us drift now, gently, below the surface, where the water darkens, where light becomes a whisper, and where time stands still. Among the wreckage shoes left behind, bottles sealed with silence, timber warped by salt and sorrow lie, the stories of ships that did not escape their fate. This is where the sea tells its own version of history. Welcome to the world of shipwrecks and the relics they left behind. Beneath the surface, the sea is not silent. It hums with memory-long, slow notes held beneath currents and time. It keeps its secrets in salt and silt, and for every ship that once cut proudly across the horizon, there are hundreds more that lie below, forgotten by most, remembered only by what they left behind. Imagine yourself drifting slowly downward into water tinted with twilight. The waves grow distant above you. The pressure deepens. The cold sets in, but not unkindly. It wraps around you like a heavy cloak. And there, resting on the ocean floor, are pieces of lives once lived. Let's begin, not with a single wreck, but with a pattern of phenomenon as steady as the tide. In the 17th century alone, thousands of ships vanished. Some were caught in storms, some struck hidden reefs, others simply appeared. The wooden bones of these vessels, scattered across coasts and coves, from the Caribbean to the Baltic Sea. What remains? Not always much. Salt is a slow destroyer, but certain things survive. Take shoes, for instance. Simple leather sola-soft by water, blackened by age, sometimes still found perfectly intact, preserved in mud, protected from decay by the very sediment that swallowed them. A child's slipper, a sailor's boot, no names, no owners, just quiet, weightless reminders that someone once stood in them and then vanished. Or bottles sealed with wax, buried in wreckage, filled not with treasure, but with everyday life, oil, vinegar, wine, medicine, some with tiny air bubbles still clinging to the inside of the glass, as if the moment of sinking was frozen in place, and coins scattered like breadcrumbs across the seabed, some meant for trade, others for bribery, or for sailors' wages never paid. They glint faintly under torchlight when divers find them, still bearing the faces of kings and emperors, corroded but legible, as if the past is whispering just beneath the surface. But it is not just objects the sea preserves. It holds entire stories, if you know how to listen. In 1717, a ship called the Widow Galley went down in a storm off the coast of Cape Cod. Originally a slave ship, it had been captured by pirates and turned into a floating fortress of stolen gold, silks, and spices. Her new captain, was the infamous Black Sam Bellamy Young, charismatic and perhaps more myth than man. He died that night with his crew, over 100 souls, dashed against the shoals in darkness. But the sea did not keep them entirely. In 1984, the wreck of the Widow was discovered. There, in the cold sand, archaeologists found cannons, silver, and shackles, but also a leg bone wrapped in a silk stocking, still wearing a boot, a haunting image. A man in motion, forever paused. It wasn't just treasure they pulled from the wreckage, was time itself, surfaced and blinking in the light. Travel eastward in your imagination, across to the Baltic Sea. The year is 1676. The Swedish warship Kronen, among the largest of her day, explodes mid-battle and sinks in a matter of minutes. She carries nearly 800 men. Few survive. Centuries later, divers find her again, resting at the bottom, immense and broken. Inside, among the wreckage, they find something unexpected. A loaf of bread, flattened, fossilized by salt and darkness, but still unmistakably bread. Black, dense, sour-smelling. It had never been eaten. You can almost see the hand that once placed it down, thinking they would return to it later. But time ran out. That loaf now sits preserved in a museum, quiet, unassuming, yet somehow more human than any sword or medal ever could be. In 1692, a city slipped into the sea. Port Royal, Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth, a hub of rum, gold, and pirate trade. Its taverns overflowed. Its governors lived richly. Its docks were lined with ships of every flag. And then, one June morning, the ground trembled. An earthquake struck. In a matter of minutes, the earth liquefied beneath the city. Buildings cracked, crumbled, and then slid wholesale into the harbor. Streets, homes, people swallowed whole. The sea rose up to finish what the quake began. Today, the remains of that city still sit just offshore. Brick walls, stone steps, door frames still upright beneath the waves. Divers swim past windows that haven't been touched in 300 years. Inside, pottery sits on shelves, a pipe left on a table, a pocket watch stuck forever at 11:43 a.m. The moment the world stopped. It is not violent, this underwater city. It is peaceful, suspended, as if waiting. Sometimes, the sea even gives us faces. In certain wrecks, the cold and pressure preserve bodies in eerie detail. Skin turned leathery, clothes still clinging, hair curled with brine. But always, respectfully, the recovery teams treat these not as curiosities, but as reminders that history is not made by ideas. It is made by people, by hands that tied knots, feet that climbed rigging, voices that sang into the wind. And when we find them quietly sleeping beneath centuries of silt, they remind us that every journey we study ended in someone's final breath. And so we begin to understand. The sea is not just a destroyer, it is also a vault. Not a perfect one, but persistent. It erodes paper, but cradles iron. It swallows names, but leaves behind tools, clothes, coins, bowls, each one heavy with story. In recent decades, advances in underwater archaeology have brought new light to old wrecks. But most of the ocean floor remains untouched, silent, waiting. Somewhere, at this very moment, there may be a spoon lying in perfect stillness, a locket, a child's toy, a wooden comb, a playing card. Small things, long parted from their owners, still waiting to be found. And perhaps they never will be. But even in their obscurity, they speak. They remind us that history is not written only by the victors, but by those who vanished, quietly, unexpectedly, in storms and fog, in war and hunger, in a moment where the horizon closed forever. So now, as we slowly rise from these dark, silent waters, we turn toward the shore once more, not to the life of sailors, but to those who watched from windows. Let us step into a world of chandeliers and carved wood, into warm parlors where maps are drawn and orders are signed. A world above the deck, above the hold, a world of comfort, but also of uneasy ambition. Let us enter the governor's mansion at Port Royal and observe how the other half lived. The sea may bury many things, but power, it seems, always floats above the wreckage, above the salt and silence, where those who rarely touched the rope or felt the cold bite of spray. Their hands signed charters, not rigging knots. Their food came warm, served on porcelain, not from barrels of brine. While sailors toiled and drowned, the governors watched from balconies. But even within gilded halls, the air was not always sweet. The same winds that toppled ships carried whispers of betrayal, ambition, and uneasy peace. So now, let us step ashore. Let us walk slowly up the coral-lined paths of Port Royal, past market stalls and swaying palms, toward the mansion on the hill, where rum flowed freely, and alliances were as fragile as glass. This is life in the governor's mansion. The sea may have been wild, but here, on the hillside overlooking Port Royal, things moved more gently, or so it seemed. Imagine yourself standing beneath the wide eaves of a coral stone veranda. The air is warm, thick, with the mingled scent of hibiscus, wood smoke, and salt. The sea below glitters with late afternoon sun. The city murmurs, faintly, like a hive busy, chaotic, alive. But up here, at the governor's mansion, the noise is softened, filtered through thick walls and polished floors. The pace is slower, the air cooler, the power, quieter. The mansion is not grand by European standards, no soaring ceilings or marble halls. But here in the Caribbean, where most buildings are one story and made of wood, it stands tall and proud, 2 floors of carved limestone, imported tiles, and hardwood beams brought in from the Blue Mountains. As you enter through its arched doorway, notice the smoothness of the stone floor beneath your feet. Cool, even in the tropical heat. The walls are whitewashed, trimmed with deep walnut. Open shutters allow filtered sunlight to cast long, slow rectangles across the hallway. Inside, everything whispers of wealth and distance. Silk curtains faded slightly by sun, Delft pottery on narrow shelves, a grandfather clock ticking in the corner, shipped all the way from London, a portrait of King William III, slightly askew. There is no hurry here, but that does not mean there is no tension. The governor rises early, before the harbor wakes. He sits at his writing desk with a cup of chicory coffee and reads dispatches sent by fast packet ships. Letters from London, sealed with wax. Reports from inland plantations, yields of sugar, uprisings among the enslaved. News of privateers along the Spanish Main. A ledger showing taxes unpaid by certain merchants. Every page matters. Every page carries a decision, a debt, or a threat. His world is one of delicate balances. Port Royal thrives on contradictions. It is, at once, a royal colony, a pirate haven, a trade outpost, and a social experiment in uneasy coexistence. Here, naval officers drink with smugglers. Anglican priests hold sermons beside houses of gambling and sin, and the governor must smile at them all. He is diplomat, judge, strategist, and symbol. At midday, he receives guests in the drawing room. Here, surrounded by fans spinning lazily above, men speak in careful tones. A Dutch shipowner complains of unfair tariffs. A British officer reports unrest on the northern coast. A local planter demands leniency on labor laws. Each man bows slightly, but none of them forget that power here is as fluid as the tides. The governor listens, he nods, he signs where needed. He is calm but not passive. He knows when to lean in, when to threaten, when to promise him, when to say nothing at all. Behind him hangs a map, not a new one, yellowed, creased, hand-drawn. It shows the Caribbean with strange proportions, some islands too large, others forgotten entirely. He keeps it there not for accuracy, but for memory. In the dining hall, lunch is a formal affair, not extravagant but precise. Tablecloths are pressed linen, cutlery polished. The governor's steward announces each course quietly. A soup of plantain and bay leaf, fried fish with breadfruit, roasted game bird served with cassava bread, a glass of claret, dark and dry. Across the table sit men of various ranks and loyalties, navy captains, magistrates, surveyors, wealthy planters. Some are friends, some rivals, some simply tolerated for now. After the heat of midday, the mansion rests. Ceiling fans turn above shadowed rooms. Servants move quietly, sweeping, folding, polishing silver. In the back kitchen, a girl grinds spices with a wooden pestle. The scent of nutmeg and allspice drifts into the hall. In his private study, the governor removes his coat and sits with a glass of aged rum. He opens a journal bound in worn leather. Here, the entries are not official, they are personal. Notes of people he does not trust, letters he regrets, ships he suspects won't return. There is a drawer in the desk. It contains a pistol, a spare key, and a list of names. Not enemies, just ... people to watch. Through the shuttered window, he can see the harbor, the sloops and brigs, the wide-decked slave ships, the merchantmen from Bristol, the frigates, their guns black and gleaming, all of them symbols of empire. All of them, in some way, under his watch. But for how long? He knows things shift quickly here. One storm, one rebellion, one poorly timed letter, and the mansion will be just another ruin. While the governor rests, others do not. Below stairs, the house breathes differently. The kitchen, warm and humming, iron pots clanging, rice boiling, a boy fanning the flames, a woman stirring a sauce that has no written recipe. Her great-grandmother taught it. She, in turn, will pass it on. These are the voices never recorded. The laundress who spends hours bent over the washing stone. The boy who cleans chamber pots at dawn. The man who oils the governor's boots until he sees his own face in them. They live here too, not by choice, but completely. One girl, young, carries a picture room to room. She listens, she watches, she knows which officers leave drunk, which letters arrive urgently, which drawers are never opened. She will never write a book, but she remembers everything. And when Port Royal sinks, she may be one of the few to understand why. At dusk, the city below glows with amber light. Lanterns sway gently in the breeze. The sound of music floats upward, fiddles' drunken laughter, the clash of dice. The governor dresses for evening, powdered wig, embroidered waistcoat, a ring he rarely removes. He walks the veranda with a guest from London, a man sent to observe, to report, perhaps to replace. Their words are measured, their smiles thin. They drink punch spiced with cinnamon and lime. The sea reflects starlight like shards of broken glass. Some nights, the governor hosts salons gatherings of the colony's elite. There is dancing, music played on harpsichord, conversations about European politics, local rumors, and art. But beneath the surface, everyone watches everyone else. Because here, alliances are temporary, and ambition never sleeps. Despite the polish, the mansion is not perfect. Termites nibble at floorboards. Tropical damp creeps in through stone. The shutters creak in strong winds. The roof leaks when the rain comes sideways. Like the colony itself, it is beautiful and slowly falling apart. The governor knows this. He has lived long enough to feel the rot in the foundation, to hear the timbers shift underfoot. Still, he pours another glass. Still, he signs another decree. He knows he will not be remembered as a hero. He hopes, at best, to be remembered as a survivor. History tells us what he cannot yet know. That one June morning in 1692, the ground will shudder. The harbor will roar. The sea will rise with a sound no one alive can describe. And the mansion walls, books, clocks, secrets will slip beneath the earth like a stone in a pond. But not tonight. Tonight, the candles flicker, the boots shine, the governor sips rum in the warm dark. The city sleeps lightly, and somewhere, out at sea, a ship approaches. And now we drift. The tide of history recedes slowly, like the sea at low moon, leaving behind small things glinting in the sand, fragments of life, softened by time, worn smooth by memory. You've traveled far tonight, from the splintered bunks of colonial sailors, gnawing on worm-riddled biscuits and shivering through storm-dark nights, to the icy expanse where Henry Hudson's breath fogged in frozen air, where ambition was swallowed by silence, then downward into the cold depths where shoes and spoons and secrets rest gently in silt, and finally into the carved elegance of a coral stone mansion where power spoke in whispers and rum smelled like compromise. So much struggle, so many names forgotten, so many hands that rode, pulled, scraped, and prayed, all of it buried beneath time, or floating quietly just beneath the surface. You may be wondering what it all means. After all, these were lives so far removed from ours. Their letters are faded, their bones long returned to earth or salt. But in each of these stories, there is something enduring, not glory, not even warning, but rhythm, a certain quiet rhythm to being human. Consider, for a moment, the sailor, awakened by bells in the dark. He ties his boots with stiff fingers. The ship groans beneath him. He eats in silence, barely chewing, then climbs into the rigging, where the wind stings like needles. He does not speak of glory. He speaks of ropes, knots, wind direction, when the rations will run out, and whether the rats have gotten into the flour. Day after day, he repeats the same motions: scrub the deck, haul the rope, patch the sail, stand the watch. It is not exciting, but it is enduring. And there is something deeply human in that. repeating tasks, not because they are noble, but because they are necessary. The world of these sailors was small sky, sail, sea, and the next meal. But it was a world, nonetheless. And within that narrow rhythm, they carried centuries of effort forward. Not all of them lived, but enough of them did. Then there is Hudson, a man whose dreams were larger than the maps he sailed. He believed in the shape of something that had never been seen, a passage across the top of the world, a gateway no one else could find. He was not foolish nor reckless. He was simply persistent. And sometimes that is more dangerous than anything, because persistence leads us into places where caution hesitates. For Hudson, it led him to cold water and thinner trust. It led him to a place where men no longer believed what he believed, and in that gap, mutiny grew. But Hudson's story is not just one of tragedy. It is also one of distance between what we know and what we hope to find. And every age has its own version of that distance. Even now, we sail toward things that may not exist. We map what we do not yet understand. And sometimes, we, too, are left adrift by those who once followed us. The ocean floor holds no great monuments. There are no statues in the mud, no plaques on the coral, and yet somehow these silent wrecks speak. A shoe, preserved in cold mud, says more than any speech. A bottle sealed in a wrecked hull whispers louder than cannon fire. They are echoes of routine, of domesticity, of normalcy interrupted. A bowl never finished, a coin never spent, a letter never delivered. They remind us that history is not made solely by those with titles or armies, but by people who were doing ordinary things at the moment history arrived. And in that way, the ocean becomes less of a grave and more of an archive. And what of the governor? He who watched the harbor from behind shutters, who sipped rum and signed orders, who knew every name in the ledgers, but none of the names below stairs. His world was not built on waves, but on walls, on contracts, on carefully chosen silence. He lived in a mansion, but ruled a powder keg. He survived by managing balance between law and corruption, loyalty and bribe, silence and action. Yet, for all his effort, the ground still opened beneath him, and so the mansion fell into the sea, not because he failed, but because the world does not always wait for men to finish their plans. His clock ticked, the map hung crooked, the porch lamp swayed in the wind, and still it ended, because power, like wood, warps over time, and stone, no matter how heavy, does not float. So what remains? Not the salt pork, not the gold, not even the names on the ships. What remains is the silence that followed, the space between the storm and the sunrise, the memory of footsteps across creaking decks, of voices singing into the night just to remember the sound of home. And that rhythm, soft, patient, enduring, continues even now. When you lie in the dark and feel your breath rise and fall like the tide, when you imagine yourself on a quiet ship rocking gently beneath stars, when you hear nothing but your own heartbeat steady as a bell, then you are part of that rhythm too. Let go now. Let go of sails and salt and distant thunder. Let go of names you don't need to remember. Let go of the ropes, the coins, the lists of cargo. Let go of the wind in the rigging and the boots on wet stairs. Let it all slip back into the deep. There is no storm here, no mast to climb, no ledger to balance, no flag to raise, only you and breath and rest. The world you live in is quieter than theirs ever was. You do not need to rise at dawn to beat the frost. You do not need to climb the mast in high winds. You do not sleep beside barrels or rats or rotting meat. The bed you lie in now is soft, the air still, the night forgiving. Whatever weight you carry, you may set it down for now. The tide will hold it. The past has passed, and the sea no longer demands anything from you. Imagine the world slowing. Imagine the lanterns going out one by one, the harbor dimming, the ships turning dark, the mansion fading into quiet, the waves hush, the stars steady. You are no longer in Port Royal or on the Discovery or beneath the waves. You are here, still and safe, and very, very far from the noise of history. Let it go, breathe, and let the rhythm of sleep find you now, as it has found so many before you. Good night.